Plant alkaloids is one of my absolute favorite parts of amines. We're going to call this your health notes, and we're going to learn all about all these amines that are in plants and how they can kill you or help you. What you're looking at right now is a poppy plant, which we get opium from, which is an amine as well. Your book spends a decent amount of time talking about heterocyclic amines. This is not something I need you guys to memorize the parent chains for. I just wanted to talk to you about a couple really cool heterocyclic amines. So here we have piperidine and conine, and I'm just going to write that out for you to put in your notes. These are heterocyclic amines, meaning the nitrogen is part of the ring structure. This again is not something you need to memorize. You don't need to memorize the names for these guys, but I did want to talk about them. Piperidine is isolated from the pepper plant, and there's a plant, that's where we get our pepper from, which is kind of neat. I've never seen that growing on there. Conine's way cooler. So the plant that you're looking at is called poison hemlock. And poison hemlock comes in a lot of different forms. It is definitely something that if you were to ingest it, you would die. It is pretty darn poisonous. Looks a little bit like parsley. Don't eat things out of the field, guys, because things that look like parsley or look like carrots will kill you. So just, eat what comes from the grocery store. The compound in poison hemlock that is poisonous is conine. So it's a heterocyclic amine that's responsible for the toxicity of this plant when you ingest it. And these plants are not just trying to kill us, okay? Keep in mind this is their predatory defense. So it's a way to keep them from being eaten by other herbivores. So don't eat plants in the wild. We are going to talk through all of these specific plant alkaloids. These plant alkaloids are ones that you're going to be responsible for being able to identify on a test. And these are ones that you would be most likely to run into in your everyday life. I doubt that you would come across poison hemlock unless you really knew where to look and what to look for. These ones you probably encounter on a daily basis. Hopefully it's caffeine that you encounter on a daily basis and not the other ones. All right, so the way these slides are going to work is I haven't put every single thing up on the slides because there's just not room and it would be a lot of writing. So I would recommend probably pausing me and then writing down this outline, and then I'm going to add to these where you see blank spots there. All right, so caffeine is the amine that we're probably most intimately familiar with. Here's the structure of caffeine over here. And it is a central nervous system stimulant. It's found in tea, coffee, chocolate. There's a lot of places that you can find that. In small doses, it has fairly positive effects. It's going to increase your heart rate, so it's going to make you feel like you're going a little bit more, dilate your airways. It is also going to increase your secretion of stomach acid and increase glucose production. So when you start to break down your glycogen and you're increasing glucose production, you're able to metabolize that. It feels like you have more energy, which is why you feel like you have more energy after drinking coffee. It's because it's stimulating glucose production from glycogen. You're breaking that down and all of a sudden you have more energy. So that's a great side effect of caffeine. In small doses, caffeine is okay. In larger doses, it leads to conditions such as insomnia. Obviously, you're taking a lot of caffeine, you're increasing your energy production, you're not going to be able to sleep. It also can cause some anxiety, and it definitely causes dehydration. It's going to make you go to the bathroom more than you need to, and if you're not replacing that with water, instead you're replacing it with more coffee, you've created this vicious cycle of peeing. When you stop taking caffeine, we all know what that feels like. You get withdrawals are going to cause also insomnia. It will also cause anxiety, causes irritability. Irritability is tough to spell. And mild depression. can also get those caffeine headaches, those withdrawal headaches that come along with that. I did skip anacin. Anacin is just aspirin plus caffeine. It's supposed to be good for headaches. I don't really take it. So to make caffeine, to make coffee, we pick coffee cherries, and you're seeing that image right over here. So those coffee cherries are picked by hand. Then they have to be dried, and you wind up getting 2 seeds per fruit. So each one of these is going to have 2 seeds in it. And those are your coffee beans. And then those, once they're dried out, will get roasted. And it's a lot of work to make that cup of coffee in the morning for you. I always find this interesting. This is a table from your book that talks about the average caffeine content in common foods and drugs, keeping in mind that this is not a hard and fast rule of how much caffeine that you're getting. But brewed coffee, if you take an 8-ounce serving of that, on average, you're getting about 133 milligrams of caffeine. Instant coffee is less. And I want you to also check this out. So decaf coffee still has a certain amount of caffeine, just way less caffeine than what you get from a caffeinated cup of coffee. Tea has caffeine in it as well. Chocolate, we're feeding those to our children and they're going nuts. It's because they're getting a little bit of caffeine there. No Dose is a caffeine pill that you can take. It's popular with, I don't know who's popular. I always think of truck drivers. You know, they have 11-hour shifts. They have to make sure they're not falling asleep. You always see it at gas stations to buy. There's a decent amount of caffeine in that. That's about at the threshold where you're going to start to feel shaky if you take that much. All right, nicotine is another one that I feel like we as a species come across more often. Hopefully, this is not something on your daily ritual of amine substances. Nicotine is actually highly toxic. In small doses, so very small doses, it is a stimulant and it creates a sense of pleasure when you're taking that amine in. But if you get a large dose of nicotine, it can cause depression, nausea, and even death. So there's something called green tobacco sickness, and it's where if workers in the field are collecting tobacco leaves when they're wet, they can actually transdermally or through their skin absorb high amounts of nicotine, and it can be toxic for those workers. So nicotine in large doses can cause death. Nicotine is found in plants. Again, we talked about this idea of plants using amines as predatory defense, and this is just the same. So this is the tobacco plant's defense against predators. We use it commercially as an insecticide to keep bugs off of plants. It is considered highly addictive. And the effects on the body, we usually are going to inhale nicotine through cigarette smoke, and that in itself is going to cause a lot of lung-related problems. So it can cause lung and heart disease. It also leads to cancer because you are burning plant material, which has a lot of compounds in it that is dangerous within the body as well. If you were to try to quit nicotine cold turkey, you are going to experience a lot of the same withdrawal symptoms that you experience with caffeine. You're going to have some restlessness, some anxiety. You're going to feel cravings for nicotine, which is why it's so hard to quit smoking once you've established that addiction. All right, so one thing that people can do in order to stop smoking is to replace the nicotine that they're getting through inhalation, through smoking cigarettes, with a nicotine patch. And you guys are seeing this gentleman putting a nicotine patch on himself. Nicotine patches deliver nicotine transdermally, so through the skin. Once it's through the skin, it can get to the bloodstream and it can quell those cravings. Another option is nicotine gum. That's just another delivery device for nicotine. To produce this, tobacco leaves have to be harvested, although you're going to have to do it when the tobacco leaves aren't wet, or your workers are going to have to be protected with the right PPE. Those tobacco leaves are dried and then they get converted to cigarettes and other tobacco products. Morphine and its related alkaloids should be pretty familiar to you. This is something that we are still using today as an analgesic, so a pain-killing or pain-relieving remedy. It has been used by the human species for about 6,000 years, both recreationally and for pain relief. Morphine is found in poppy plants. And you are seeing poppy seeds right here, which we will talk about soon. So morphine is a compound that contributes, it's one of the many compounds in poppy seeds, but it contributes to the most analgesic and narcotic effect from the poppy plants. Also from the poppy is codeine, so that is present, but it's present in a lot smaller amounts in the plants. And these are both very useful in relieving severe chronic pain. You would typically use morphine for more severe pain, and most likely if you have an acute injury or acute pain, you will be prescribed codeine instead, which is better for less severe pain. Morphine and any opiates are considered very addictive. And one of the biggest issues with it is your body builds a tolerance to morphine. So in order to get the same pain relieving effects, you're going to have to take bigger and bigger doses. So this can get pretty dangerous pretty quickly. 95% of the morphine that is legally obtained is converted to codeine, that lesser form that's less of the analgesic, but less of the narcotic effect as well. So it's better for acute injuries. Some of that morphine is converted to heroin, and that would be definitely an illicit drug. Heroin is very addictive. Here we're seeing the difference in structure between morphine, codeine, and heroin. Notice that they're very similar in structure. Heroin is less polar than morphine, so it's more nonpolar, which means it's going to be more soluble in fat cells in the body. So because of this, it is going to be 2 to 3 times more potent than morphine. It's getting stored in your fat cells as well, and so it's going to lead to more euphoria and more pain relief. So the way that we create the way that we create heroin is we start with morphine, and we're going to replace 2 hydroxyl groups, this one and this one, with acetate esters. Okay, so here we have acetate esters, and we're not going to talk about that reaction, but it is a pretty simple couple of steps to get from morphine, which is legal with a prescription, to heroin, which is not prescribable. All right, so quinine is our next one. Quinine comes from I'm going to butcher this, cinchona tree, which is found in the Andes. It comes from the tree bark. So this comes from a tree that's found in the Andes Mountains. It is a powerful antipyretic, which means it's a fever reducer. For centuries, this was the only effective malaria treatment because malaria, if you were to get malaria, it comes along with a high fever, and that high fever can be very dangerous. So for a long time, quinine was given to reduce the fever, and that was one of the only tools we had to combat malaria. It has a very bitter taste. And nowadays, you're going to see quinine added to tonic water. So if you drink tonic water, or you have drinks that are made with tonic water, that's what's giving it its characteristic bitter flavor. I did have a chance last semester, somebody brought me tonic water to try. I highly do not recommend it by itself. It's it has to be an acquired taste. But maybe that'll give you something to do. Go try some tonic water on its own. Atropine is one of my favorites to talk about because I love my plant alkaloids. So atropine comes from the plant. Atropa belladonna. And oftentimes this plant is just called belladonna to keep it short. It is also known, I love this nickname, as the deadly nightshade plant, which I think gives it a lot of street cred. Again, guys, don't eat things in the wild. Plants really don't want to be eaten, and they're creating all kinds of toxic compounds to kill predators. So Atropa belladonna is the plant, the deadly nightshade plant, and the compound that is poisonous to us is atropine. Atropine has a really funny kind of history. It was used during the Renaissance period, so between the 14th and 17th centuries. It was used for cosmetic reasons. So women during the Renaissance would squeeze the berries to get the juice, and they put those in the pupils of their eyes. And once that juice touched the eyes, it would cause dilation of the pupils. So they'd have these really big pupils, and that was considered really pretty. So, of course, you know, we would put poisons into our body to look beautiful. Um, so for quite some time, ophthalmologists also used atropine when they needed to do eye exams, where they had to dilate your pupils so that they could look into your eyes. But they don't use atropine anymore. And one of the reasons that they have stopped using atropine to do eye exams is because when you put atropine in the eye, it can increase the heart rate. It does cause smooth muscles to relax. So if you were to ingest atropine, it would cause all your smooth muscles, and remember those are your involuntary ones, to relax. It interferes with nerve impulses also. So that can be very dangerous for all those smooth muscles that you need to work constantly. So they use something else to dilate your eyes now and not that. So again, large doses are toxic. It's going to lead to, if you were to ingest this, it's going to lead to convulsions, coma, and death. So don't eat plants that you find in the wild. Moral of the story. Our final plant alkaloid is not a plant alkaloid. I just didn't know where else to put it. But let's talk about methamphetamine, also known as speed, also known as crystal meth, also known as something you should never do, even on a recreational basis. Don't do drugs. All right, so the effects of methamphetamine. Your book describes it as a pleasurable high. And the reason they call it a pleasurable high is because when you take methamphetamine or a lot of different amphetamines, adrenaline, epinephrine, it's going to increase the rate of dopamine in your brain. So that's your feel-good chemical. So you're increasing dopamine, it feels good, it's going to be a pleasurable high. It is highly addictive, though, as anything that can affect dopamine levels in the body, it is very addictive. It is not found in a plant, but it is easily synthesized. It is easy to make. If anybody has watched Breaking Bad, they make it look really easy. I don't think it's that easy, and I don't think it's something anyone should do. It can be very dangerous to synthesize methamphetamine. When you take methamphetamine, but we're never going to, but if you were to, it would cause an increased heart rate. So your heart's going to be beating faster, which means you're going to have an increased respiratory rate as well. So when you increase both of those, you're also going to get an increase in glucose production and a decrease in hunger. Some side effects of taking methamphetamine include delirium. In hallucinations, you're going to have weakened blood vessels as well because your heart is pumping at a faster rate. It's going to tax everything else in your body. Asthma and lung disease are common, and a lot of that has to do with the delivery route of smoking methamphetamine. It is going to cause an enlarged heart. Remember that your heart is a muscle. If it's working overtime, it's working faster, it is going to get bigger. And when it gets bigger, it does not work as effectively. Your valves don't close as well. You will also wind up with narrowed coronary arteries. So this image is showing us shows us a narrowed artery. So when you have narrowing of the arteries, that's essentially like inducing a state of high blood pressure for you. It takes your heart a lot more effort to pump blood through that smaller opening. And so there are a lot of heart issues that come with that. You can get a coronary artery spasm, which will close off your coronary artery, which is going to lead to a heart attack. If you have prolonged use, sleepiness, is going to be a side effect. Seizures, hallucinations, paranoia, serious heart disease are going to be the effects of long-term use. So I always say everything in moderation, but not methamphetamine. Never methamphetamine.